From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But first, here's a look at the latest headlines. Spain officially recognizes Palestine as a state, with East Jerusalem as its capital. Israel accuses Spain of being a partner to the incitement of Jewish genocide. Belgium commits to deliver 30 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, along with weapons worth over $1 billion. Belgium says the first deliveries of the jets will begin by the end of 2024. China hosts Arab nations to advance the Belt and Road Initiative in the Middle East. Leaders from Bahrain, Egypt, Tunisia, and the United Arab Emirates to meet Xi Jinping on May 30th. India issues a red alert as a heat wave continues across large parts of the country. This as temperatures in the northwestern state of Rajasthan touches 122 degrees Fahrenheit or 50 degrees Celsius. And Argentina initiates a collaboration with El Salvador to explore Bitcoin adoption as the cryptocurrency crosses the $68,000 mark. In 2021, El Salvador became the first nation to adopt Bitcoin as its official currency. We begin in the Middle East, where Israel is staring at a severe border crisis. In the south, an Egyptian soldier was killed in a firing incident with the Israeli army on the Rafah border. Egypt's military intelligence says there was heavy fighting between Israeli troops and Hamas in Gaza on the other side of the Rafah border. And as the fighting escalated, Egyptian security personnel took protective countermeasures. And amid the firing, an Egyptian soldier was killed, reportedly by Israeli troops. Now, both Egypt and Israel have launched an investigation into the incident. However, some Israeli military personnel are reportedly blaming Egypt for the deadly exchange of fire. Israel has confirmed that none of its troops were either killed or injured. And now Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty back in 1979, and the two nations have cooperated ever since. However, tensions have been escalating between Israel and Egypt since the war first began in October of last year. The Israeli military has been operating in Rafah and controlling the border crossing in Gaza since early May. And Egypt has shut down its side of the Rafah border crossing, preventing crucial humanitarian aid from entering Gaza. In fact, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has even accused Cairo of holding Gaza hostage. Now, as the situation intensifies on the Rafah border, Israel is facing heightened tensions to its north. Lebanon-based Hezbollah fired at least 50 rockets at 3 Israeli border towns, wounding several civilians. In retaliation, Israel launched airstrikes deep into Lebanon, killing at least 7 Hezbollah fighters. Israel claims that it dropped bombs on 3 Hezbollah locations and destroyed 1 command center of the Iran-backed group. And now Hezbollah says they will increase their attacks on Israel.
This Israeli attack will only make us more attached to the resistance, and it will persuade the people of this area not to leave. We are in a state of war with the Israelis. Of course, there will be sacrifices and losses, but at the same time, the resistance is also inflicting losses.
Now, in recent weeks, Hezbollah has stepped up its cross-border attacks on Israel to show their solidarity for Palestinians in Gaza. With a firing incident in Egypt and cross-border strikes with Hezbollah, Israel's war in Gaza is showing ominous signs of spreading throughout the region. And staying in the Middle East, the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, has reported that Iran has further increased its stockpile of enriched uranium, taking it closer to weapons-grade levels. The United Nations nuclear watchdog says Tehran has 313 pounds, or 142 kilograms of enriched uranium. The agency also adds that the uranium has been enriched to 60%, which is just one technical step away from reaching weapons-grade uranium levels of 90%. Now, the nuclear watchdog has also warned that Iran has the capability to use the 60% enriched uranium to make nuclear weapons. Though most nuclear bombs use uranium enriched to 90%, the IAEA says that the weapons could also be made using just the 60% enriched uranium. Now, the latest report highlights that Iran now has a total stockpile of over 1,300 pounds, or 6,200 kilograms of enriched uranium. This is an increase of almost twice the enriched uranium stockpile that Tehran had just last year. Now, it takes just 92 pounds, or 42 kilograms of the enriched uranium to make one nuclear bomb. Given Iran's current stockpile, the country could manufacture up to 14 atom bombs. Now, what's more alarming is that Iran has suspended talks with the nuclear watchdog after the death of President Ibrahim Raisi. The planned talks consisted of Tehran providing an update to the IAEA on the nuclear program, but now they've been put on hold by Iran indefinitely. A lack of trust between Iran and the nuclear watchdog have been rising since 2018, when then U.S. President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal. Now, under the original deal, Iran was allowed to enrich uranium to only a little above 3%. Iran has repeatedly denied any ambition to develop nuclear weapons. However, the country's nuclear program remains under guidance and control of its supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And moving to East Asia, North Korea's latest attempt to put a spy satellite into orbit was a failure. The rocket carrying the satellite exploded just 2 minutes after liftoff. Pyongyang's launch attempt drew criticism from Japan, South Korea, and the United States. They believe Russia is helping North Korea with its space mission in exchange for weapons that are being used against Ukraine. Our next report takes you inside the failed launch and what it means for the region.
North Korea's latest attempt to put a spy satellite into orbit has failed. Pyongyang says its rocket exploded mid-air just minutes after liftoff on Monday. The statement came after South Korea's military reported the launch of an unidentified projectile. Earlier on Monday, North Korea issued a warning that it would try to launch a satellite and its window would last until the 4th of June. This announcement prompted criticism from both Seoul and Tokyo as they urged Pyongyang to call off the launch. While Japan briefly issued an emergency alert ordering evacuations in the southern Okinawa prefecture, South Korea's military held fighter jet drills in a show of force.
Even if the purpose was to launch a satellite, it is a clear violation of the relevant UN Security Council resolutions, prohibiting any launches using ballistic missile technology by North Korea.
Our military is closely monitoring North Korea's possible provocations and activities and is prepared for them. So, even if they conduct missile provocations and launch of the reconnaissance satellite at the same time, I will tell you that we are fully ready for them.
The United States also condemned the launch, saying it took place in violation of multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. These resolutions ban Pyongyang's use of ballistic missile technology. Now, the attempted satellite launch followed a rare trilateral summit by Seoul, Beijing, and Tokyo. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida denounced North Korea's launch plan. However, Chinese Premier Li Qiang did not mention the launch but called on all parties to lower tensions in the Korean peninsula. Now, putting a spy satellite into orbit has long been a top priority for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The nuclear-armed nation claims it successfully placed its first spy satellite last November after 2 failed attempts. However, South Korea's intelligence agency has cast doubts on the claim of the satellite being fully functional. November's launch came 2 months after Kim Jong-un made a rare trip to Russia and toured its Space Launch Center, where President Vladimir Putin promised to help Pyongyang build satellites. At the end of last year, the North Korean leader said that Pyongyang would launch 3 more military spy satellites in 2024. These launches would be a continuation of his military modernization program, which saw a record number of weapon tests in 2023. Reports say some Russian engineers even visited North Korea to help with its latest launch preparations. South Korea and the US have alleged that North Korea is sending weapons to Moscow in return for the technical assistance. And Russia is reportedly using these weapons in the war against Ukraine. But all these allegations and criticism don't seem to affect Kim Jong-un, who wants to keep an eye on the world with his space missions.
And now to Russia, which is planning to remove Afghanistan's ruling Taliban from the list of terrorist organizations. The Russian envoy to Afghanistan says that the delisting would enable Moscow to decide whether to formally recognize the Taliban government. For years now, Russia has fostered relations with the Taliban by holding multiple rounds of talks and boosting trade despite international sanctions. Recently, Moscow invited the Taliban to attend its biggest annual economic forum. The event was once seen as the cornerstone of Russia's economic ties with the West before its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, Russia's foreign and justice ministries have reported to Vladimir Putin on the issue of removing the ban. Russia's foreign minister says the Taliban is the real power in Afghanistan, and its removal from the list of banned organizations reflects objective reality. In 2003, Russia recognized the Taliban movement as a terrorist organization when the radical group was waging a deadly insurgency against the United States and its allies in Afghanistan. The insurgents stormed back to power in August of 2021 as the U.S.-led forces withdrew from Afghanistan. Now, currently, no foreign country has formally recognized Taliban's government as legitimate. However, several regional countries, including China and Pakistan, have retained their embassies in Afghanistan after the Taliban takeover. In fact, last year, Kazakhstan removed the Taliban from its list of banned organizations. Now, if Russia moves to recognize the Taliban government, it would attract more criticism from Western nations who have repeatedly called Moscow a state sponsor of terrorism. And finally, in the United States, where in South Dakota, a 9-member family reunion caused a roundworm outbreak, forcing the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention to step in. It all started when the family members ate kebabs of black bear meat, and instead of leftovers, they went home with parasitic worms in their bodies. Our final report explains how this reunion party went horribly wrong.
Family reunions are rare these days, but when one does happen, it's all about fun, food, and frolic. And usually the only takeaway is a few extra kilos, but not always. A 9-person family reunion in South Dakota turned into everyone's worst nightmare. Instead of taking home leftovers to enjoy later, they took home dozens of parasitic worms in their bodies. Here's what happened. One family member decided to spice things up with some black bear meat. Hunting black bears is legal in Canada and some US states. The meat had been frozen for 45 days, supposedly to kill any parasites. And when the meat finally made its grand entrance, it was grilled with vegetables and served as kebabs. A classic meal eaten at many family parties in the US. But that hearty meal turned into a horror show, because along with the scrumptious black bear kebabs, they had also consumed gooey worms. As gross as it may sound, this is the reality. 6 of the 9 family members were struck down by a rare parasitic disease. The details emerged after the US Center for Disease Control and Prevention released an investigative report. After this party ended, the party of the worms began. A week after the reunion, a 29-year-old man was hospitalized. He had a fever, severe muscle pain, and swelling around his eyes. He tested positive for trichinella antibodies, a type of roundworm. 5 other family members had the same symptoms. They all had to be hospitalized as well. However, there were 3 lucky members who somehow escaped the wrath of the worms. officials tested the leftover meat and found roundworm larvae. Looks like they were having their own kind of reunion. The agency determined that all 6 people had trichinellosis, a disease caused by eating undercooked meat contaminated with trichinella larvae. According to the World Organization for Animal Health, some parasites can survive freezing. Hence, no amount of cold can kill them. Thus, officials advise that black bear meat needs to be cooked thoroughly. Smoking, salting, drying, and microwaving just won't cut it. The hospitalized family members were given an anti-parasitic drug, while those without symptoms got supportive care. But in the end, everyone recovered. So in the end, all's well that ends well. But next time at reunions like these, people should maybe just stick to burgers and hot dogs. And remember, if you're grilling anything wilder than your usual barbecue fare, make sure it's cooked properly. No one wants a side of worms with their kebabs. So here's to more family reunions full of fun, laughter, and parasite-free food.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.